When you're reading a nonfiction book, chances are you remember what you read, but you may not remember exactly where to find it. You possibly know what book it's in, hopefully you do, but then you don't know exactly where in that book it is. And if you want to use it as a resource, or if you want to be able to refer back to it, it's really helpful to have some notes that help you. So I thought I would take just a minute to share how I read a nonfiction book. And this is my strategy that I have learned over the years from a number of different experts, including Tim Ferriss. One of his note-taking things that he shared was really fabulous, and I will tell you which one that is. But I just have a couple of different things that I do when I'm reading a nonfiction book that make it easy for me to get back in there and discover once again the information that I'm after. So this is a flip through of a book that I read in my Healthy Readers book club. We read The Warmest Room in the House, which is how the kitchen became the heart of the 20th century American home. So we're going to start right off with the tip that I got from Tim Ferriss, which is when you find things that are really good, write them down on the inside of the book. And so what I do is I have a page number, and then I write my notes about what it is that I'm looking for, so that I'll be able to find my way back to it. For example, on page 118, and we'll jump to page 118 in a few moments, I wrote a note, soy-based multi-purpose food and famine books. And so that was something that I wanted to make a note of so that I could check back and get to that again. Now, when we flip to page 118, hold on, and you'll see that it's actually a couple page spread, obviously. It's 118 and 119. And so there's a few underlines in there. I don't like to use highlighter in my book. I did a lot of that in college, and for some reason, highlighters in nonfiction books just kind of drive me a little bit crazy. So I prefer underlines and pen. So when I underline something, it's because the way it was said was particularly important, and I really want to remember specifically that. In this particular case, in one of the first non-foods that arrived in the American kitchen was a synthetic orange juice manufactured by General Foods called Awake. Now, sometimes there are sections where I just want to make note of something because it caught my attention. And so that's why I put a double line next to it. That way I just know that within those few sentences or that paragraph is something that was important for me to be able to go back and look at that. Now, on the other side, on page 118, a couple of things again. And so this is just, again, my annotations. So we have the double lines, which we talked about. The star, multi-purpose food, that goes back to, oh, that's something else. I'll come to that in just a moment. But then down here, I wrote non-dairy food. So when I write in the margins of the book, I want to make sure that I remember it. The star is the information at the front of the book. So if I put a star in there, it corresponds to a page here. And I do that for two reasons. One, it's helpful to write down the page number that it's at, but to remember where on that 2-page spread it is a little bit difficult. So I use the star to help me. The reason I circled the words multi-purpose food was because that was the first time I had been exposed to that particular terminology. And so it was a word that I wanted to remember, that it stood out for me. Now, sometimes I draw a little arrow just because it's something that's of interest, but it's not as long as, the double line. And so that was why I put that in there. And then for the non-dairy food down here, I have a double line and I have some underlines, and I wrote non-dairy. After I have read a book, when I go all the way through the book, at the end, I go back and I check all of the writing that I've done in the margins. I call that tagging. And I don't know if that's the real term for it. That's just what I use. And then I go back and I write down all of my tags. And part of the reason that I do that is obviously I want to know this book, Poison Squad, Typhoid Mary, Hoosier Cabinets, Electricity in Kitchens, because that was a new thing, crock pots, there's all different kinds of things in here that I really wanted to be able to go back. But then if we look at things, for example, you'll see here, page 35, calorie counting appeared a lot in this book because I wrote down the other pages that it appeared on as well. And so that allows me to see if something is mentioned in the book more than once, but it was something that I thought was important. And so I can include that. And then the last thing that I do in a book, which I think is pretty important. And this is, my personal strategy here. And this book, by the way, way overwhelming, way more than any other book that I have read, nonfiction book that I have read. Anytime the author mentions a book, I write it down in the back of the book. And I write down the name of the book, and if they list the author, I write down the author's name as well so that I can have it here. And then I go through and I put a little dot next to the ones that I have read so that I can keep track of that. But you may be wondering, why would you write that down? Well, sometimes if there's a topic that I really like, or if it brings up a rabbit hole, I want to be able to know what that is, because I can possibly purchase that again. I can possibly purchase those books or read those books, borrow them from the library, or maybe I own them and it's time to read them again. And so by writing down the names of the books, I know what they are. And you may be saying, but don't a lot of nonfiction books have bibliographies? And indeed, this book does have an annotated bibliography, which is great. I love annotated bibliographies. I think they're fabulous. And so you would think, why would you write down the names of the books in the back of the book if there's a bibliography? Well, I have discovered over the years that the bibliography does not actually tell you every single book that's mentioned. So for example, looking for it here. There we go. Okay, so there were a couple of books by I always get her initials wrong, M.F.K. Fisher. One was As They Were, which he does list in the book. The other one was How to Cook a Wolf. And the title was so intriguing that I actually stopped reading, looked the book up, and discovered that this is a really amazing sounding book. And so I went to the thrift store and bought it. They actually had a copy. So I have a used copy, used like new, right there. Anyhow, I want to read you what's on the back because it was so interesting. Written to inspire courage in those daunted by wartime shortages, How to Cook a Wolf continues to rally cooks during times of plenty, reminding them that providing sustenance requires more than putting food on the table. That's just a tiny bit of it. Anyhow, this was so interesting to me that because of this habit of writing down, I now have another fabulous book to read by an amazing author. I love her writing. I love the things that she puts together. And so now I'm done reading this book, the Healthy Readers Book Club. We read this, we discussed it. It was really fabulous look at how the modern kitchen came to be. And so now it's going to go on my bookshelf. But I know that when I need to look up certain things, I can come back to this book and I have the interesting facts, I have my tags. And if I happen to be looking for another book to read, thanks to Stephen Gudula, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I have a lot more books that I can look through. So this is how Mira Dessy, the ingredient guru, reads a nonfiction book. Love to hear your thoughts. Let me know. Thanks. Bye.